it was very much looking at how artists can use AI as a tool for creating. Now, one of the things which I very much agree with that came back out of this is every artist that you speak to who even toys with the idea of AI or generative AI are not looking for a shortcut. Because if you are an artist, the creation of art is your goal. This is the beauty. This is why we do it. And so you're not looking to just churn out substandard stuff that an AI has done in 5 seconds. What the goal is to look at how you can take these AI tools and begin to really push them to their limits and stretch them and see how that changes.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between or beyond. Once again, I'm here with Sophie McKeand. Just to remind you, Sophie is an award-winning Welsh poet, writer, sound artist, and former Young People's Laureate Wales, creating at the intersection of humanity, technology, and nature. And we've been discussing the themes around her latest work, which is a cli-fi series, the Mother Trilogy, and her current book tour includes events across Wales and Sweden. Hi again, Sophie.
Hi.
And so one thing we haven't touched on is actually sort of the process of your publishing and sort of the creation of the book itself. And I was wondering about what your process was from going from a poet to deciding to actually produce a novel or a trilogy, and then specifically a science fiction trilogy as well.
So, science fiction was my first love. When I was maybe 10 or a bit younger, I discovered a book called The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper, and I fell in love with it. And there was a family friend, her name was Jane Wolfe. She was a Canadian historian. And I told her that I'd read this book and it was great. Now, she was an avid sci-fi, historical fantasy person, and she had all these Canadian books imported before they even hit the shelves in the UK. She was obsessed with these books, and so she was my first and only mentor, I would say. So from a very young age, I was introduced to Guy Gavriel Kay, Robin Hobb, Terry Pratchett, and she would allow me 3 books. I was allowed to read 3 books, and then I took them back, and she would give me 3 more. So there was, Julian May, as I said previously, and Jack the Bodiless, and the Thomas Covenant series. Do you remember? Yeah. And all of these, it was such a long time ago now, but so that was my introduction to reading. That was my grounding, if you like, in reading. And I had quite a sort of chaotic upbringing, and so my 2 methods of escapism as a young person was that I would skive school, and I would either go and sit in a corner of town and read books, or I would sniff Tipp-Ex Thin. If I'm honest, there was that crowd as well, and so there was 2 very distinct sides of me, and how I coped with the reality of my life. So I didn't have any aspiration to be a writer, because it would not have occurred to me that I could be a writer. I just loved reading. I loved books. I love Stephen King and like I say, Terry Pratchett. There was so many great writers that I could just get lost in their worlds. Guy Gavriel Kay, when I discovered the Finovarian tapestry, I cried, I laughed. I was like, how is this writer doing this? But there was no thought. I know people who say that they always knew they would be a writer, and that was not the case for me. And then I had my daughter when I was 20, and I was a single parent, signing on the dole, living in a flat in Wrexham, with all the world ahead of me, And slowly sort of worked my way out of that, and worked really hard, bought my own house, had a company car, worked in business development, and hated every minute of it. And so the idea was then that I wanted to do something that mattered. And so I sold my house and had made enough money from that I went to university, which I'd never done before, at 28 when my daughter was 8, and I did a degree in English literature and creative writing. I didn't want to do the poetry model because I had hated poetry in school, and I felt it was just old white men talking these and thous that had no bearing or relation on my life whatsoever. But the poetry module was compulsory, and so I sat in the first class thinking, I just have to go, I have to get through poetry, but I hate it. And it changed my life. I suddenly found like P.B. Shelley and William Blake and all of these romantic poets who I had detested in my teen years, I was now head over heels in love with, you know? And so I discovered poetry. And my first love was sci-fi. And then my second love as an adult was poetry. And once I discovered poetry, I then started writing and performing poetry. There was in Liverpool at the time, I just searched for anyone who did any sort of form of performance poetry. I don't know why, because there was no performance poetry module in my course, but I just suddenly wanted to speak poetry and I wanted to write poetry that could be heard. And so I found this group called the Dead Good Poets Society, and they ran out of the Everyman Theatre in Liverpool. And the first Tuesday of every month, they ran an open floor, and you had 5 minutes, and they were so strict. You had your 5 minutes, and it was Scousers. They were like, get off the stage. And so I wrote and memorized a poem or two every month, and that was my sort of grounding in performance and in sort of performance poetry and literature. And my early stuff was that I did that won an award. I won like the Bangor Slam back in 2008. After a while, I wanted to start sort of exploring a more sort of environmental poetic way, because I'd had a series of like sort of awakenings, if you like, and these deep connections with nature, and I wanted to capture that. And so I created a poetry pamphlet called Prophecy: Conversations with Myself, and that was hand stitched with like a beautiful tracing paper inserts. So the self-publishing is something that I'd done. That was also where I started with self-publishing, and I did a pamphlet. I did an album called Dark Matter. With my husband, did these like visuals. We got a load of TVs off Free Cycle, and he would do live video editing, video visuals, and a guy that we know, Steve Nichols, who's an amazing musician and guitarist. He did created these amazing soundscapes. And then metaforestry, we toured that across different woodlands, and we did these like guerrilla performances where we did a Facebook group and people joined the event, but we didn't tell them where it was till the morning, and then they would drive out to this bit of the forest, and we took over a little part of the forest and did our performance without permission, because land is free and we as human beings have the right to exist on the land without always asking permission, as long as we leave no trace. So I've always existed in that place of creating in a very sort of anarchic, punk, do-it-yourself, self-publishing manner. That was how I started out. And so the sci-fi trilogy then, it felt like a natural progression, because I did put a full-length poetry collection out through a publisher. It's the only time I've done it. It's beautiful. It's called Rebel Sun. It's a hardback. And that was an interesting experience. I always wanted to try. I've tried different publishing models, and I always wanted to try and put something out with a publisher. And a great Welsh publisher based in South Wales. I'm very happy with the book. I returned to self-publishing because I actually realized that that's where I'm happiest. That's the model that I'm happiest with. So that's where self-publishing was where I felt it's where I feel I belong. I enjoy the freedom. I prefer having complete artistic control. I appreciate that having complete artistic control means that there are things that I will miss, and it's not as perfect as having 4 or 5 sets of eyes. I mean, I do ask a couple of people to do like a beta reading and a proofreading, but it's obviously not the same as having a publishing house. It's a trade-off. It is a trade-off, and it's one that I'm prepared to make. I appreciate that, other people don't want to, and that's fine. So the sci-fi trilogy was just me returning to my first love, really. But also I had these concepts that I wanted to work through from 10 years of working in communities, and teaching poetry workshops and working on so many different community projects, and always looking at, every time you think, this is, whenever a politician has a quick fix on this is how we fix society, you pull that thread, and it is invariably tangled with a lot of other threads. And one of the things that working in communities for 10 years gave me was a very wide overview of all the different ways these threads are joined. And so there's generational trauma that can happen from when certain communities in Wales, for example, when they close the coal mines, and so you have people who have generations, there is no work in those areas, and then how do you then deal with sort of the maybe family abuse or alcoholism that might grow out of such economic circumstances? And that's, how do we cope with the generational trauma of our men who've come back from war, the Second World War, war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan? How do the women cope with that? How is our schooling system teaching young people about their emotions and about how to manage their finances, and all of these things? And so I had amassed all of these thoughts about how community does and doesn't work, and about how people present themselves, and both how we can come together and create beautiful things, and also how we can create horrors. And the poetry format was just not, it was the wrong, it didn't work. I needed a novel. I needed a trilogy. Actually, I needed 3 books in which to explore.
I guess poetry can only go so far, can't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't, so how I work creatively is I have the idea, and then the idea dictates the format. So will this be it's always the idea first. What is the concept? What is it? What is even if it's just a feeling, even if it's just a movement or a line, it's like, what is that? And then that, when I follow that dictates what this is going to be. So at the moment, I'm just finishing a sci-fi novella, but after that, I'm already working on for September a long poem in the style of maybe like Dante's Inferno or Ovid, the Iliad or something like that. So because that's where the ideas take me,
Right. Yeah. So I was just wondering then, what is your writing schedule like in your tiny home on the road?
I tend not to have a time. I am very strict on word count. So whenever I sit down, I need to do 1,000 words, and sometimes 1,000 words can take me an hour, and sometimes 1,000 words can take me 10. And so I set myself word targets. Like I need to have done so many 1,000 words per day, and that I don't write on. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the novels now. So when I'm writing the novels, when I'm writing prose, I write in 1,000 word blocks, because for me, once I get to 1,000 words or start getting past that, I worry that the writing can become a bit loose, a bit too, I'm not as focused on it. And so I stop at 1,000 words. Sometimes it goes on to 1,200. I'm not, but I stop around there to make sure that my thinking is as sharp for every 1,000-word block. If that
Right.
makes sense.
Do you then edit that segment in the same day, or do you wait until the whole piece is finished first?
Oh my God, I do so many edits. I am, it's just ridiculous. So say today I write 1,000 words. Tomorrow I will start by editing the 1,000 words that I wrote today and then doing the next 1,000 words. So every day is firstly an edit of the days before, and then I do the 1,000 words every time. And then as the story goes along, there's usually about 4 or 5 points. So for example, draft 1, I'm just writing a novella now. This is a good example. And I'm aiming for it to be around 35,000 words. So I started writing it, and then at 10,000 words, that's the end of draft 1. I hadn't got to the end of the story, but I realized that there was some glaring not mistakes, but just schisms. So then I start draft 2, and draft 2 begins with a complete not rewriting, but a complete edit of draft 1, and then I go on for maybe another 5 or 10,000 words. Then draft 3 is a complete edit of draft 2, and that then takes me further again. And so it's I see it more like the tide or a tidal wave, or it's a series of waves. So I go back, circle forwards to past where I was, and go back, come forwards to past where I was, and that sort of fluid motion works for me. I don't know that I would recommend it, but
So how long did it take you to write the trilogy then overall? And did you publish it all sort of back to back to back, or was there a sort of significant space between each book?
so it originally, The Madness of Sarah Mansfield was the first book, and I think I first wrote that in a blog poetry piece back in 2015 on Tumblr, back in the days when I used Tumblr. And then I had this sort of sci-fi idea that I worked into an hour-long play. I wasn't sure if I was going to try and write it as a series of hour-long TV pieces. And then I realized that I don't know anyone on TV, and I thought, actually, I can just I'm just going to write this as a novel. Well, I knew it was going to be bigger, so I knew it was going to be 3. And so I've been working on it for quite some years, and then the pandemic hit. And as most people, I think a lot of people wrote a book during the pandemic. So it gave me the impetus to get it finished. And then I realized that if I was going to self-publish, that I would put them out 3 books in a row. So they went out the 1st of May. So The Madness of Sarah Mansfield went out on the 1st of May 2021, and then Prophets of the Red Knight went out on the 1st of May 2022, and then Rematriation went out on the 1st of May 2023. And I chose that day because it's International Day of Anarchy, it's International Workers' Day, and so it felt fitting. And I wanted to set myself the challenge to make sure that this trilogy didn't just run on forever, that I would make myself the promise that I would hit those deadlines, and I did.
Right.
So I say, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. What I was gonna say is, so you've published CopyLeft. Have you published on any of the main platforms then, or is it just available on your website?
Yeah, it's just available on my website. My first poetry pamphlet was CopyLeft. Much of my work is CopyLeft. I have being an anarchist, I do struggle with the concept of ownership of an idea, because we don't create in a vacuum. Everything I can write because of all the writers who have gone before me, because of all the writers who exist around me, but not just that, all of the people that I meet, all of the concepts that I see. I mean, if I had to write a list of everything that inspired that trilogy, it would go on for days. There are elements of Sarah Mansfield's character, for example, that I took when I read Yanis Varoufakis. You know, he was the Greek economic minister during the time that they nearly Grexited. His sort of memoir of that time is called Adults in the Room. And there is a character in, there's not a character, this is real, but my word. I mean, he writes it brilliantly. But there is now, is he the head of the German bank or the international IMF, the IMF? Anyway, there are elements of Sarah Mansfield's character that are definitely drawn from that when she is in her power and refusing to relinquish power. And I don't know how many, I don't know how I couldn't write the books that I've written without having read all of the books that I've read or met everything we create is an amalgam. Who said that? This is not my quote. There is someone who says that everything that we create is an amalgamation of every place we've ever been, every person we've ever met, every book we've ever read. So we live within a capitalist society, and so as I say in the beginning of the first book in the introduction, what we really need is a universal income for people. And then so that it's crazy to me that a person should not have basic human safety, enough shelter, food, warmth, clothes. I mean, this is not giving people luxuries. This is the basics that a person needs to live. And for people to be born into this world with the amount of obscene wealth that exists, for a child to be born in this world without the safety net of healthcare, education, a home, clothes, food, with that being a given, an absolute, no questions asked, this is what you have, is insane to me. And so anyway, well, I went off on one. I do apologize. So
okay.
So what I return to is, I think a lot of the issues around copyleft are someone could steal the work, someone could take the books and publish it under their own name, which would be quite interesting actually, and I would make art from that if they did. And so if we remove capitalism from the equation, often people, I think, when they steal or plagiarize, it's to gain money or status. But if we remove that capitalist paradigm and replace it with one where artistic endeavor is in and of itself the point, if you like, that is the goal, is to create artistically and to reflect yourself, who you are, through your art, then you remove any of that awful competitiveness. But to now allow people to have that, and this is the idealist in me, there needs to be a universal income that people are guaranteed.
I suspect that's a whole topic for another podcast episode itself.
Read my books, it's all there.
Yeah, because there's always the question of where does the money come from in the first place, but we don't want to get into that. What was interesting when you're describing copyleft was, as you said, the fact that all your ideas come from other ideas and other people, and that leads us very nicely into generative AI, which we like to talk about on this show lately. And we were talking about a little bit in our emails as well. And so, well, I think this is one of those things that's going to be a new generational trauma, perhaps. We'll see.
Yeah.
But you were recently at a School of Digital Arts a day conference on the AI in the creative industries. I wonder if you could sort of summarize what kind of topics were discussed and if there are any sort of interesting conclusions that were drawn from that.
Yeah, that was at Manchester University, the Digital SODA, the School of Digital Arts. That's what it is. And that now, thank you to the algorithms, because that popped up as an advert in my Instagram feed, and obviously because I follow a lot of accounts to do with AI, and well, not a lot, but I follow accounts anyway. And I mean, firstly, how fantastic that they did this. They put on this entire day conference with these amazing speakers. It was free. You just had to get yourself there. I was so impressed that the university did that. So it was very much looking at how artists can use AI as a tool for creating. Now, one of the things which I very much agree with that came back out of this is every artist that you speak to who even toys with the idea of AI or generative AI are not looking for a shortcut, because if you are an artist, the creation of art is your goal. This is the beauty. This is why we do it. And so you're not looking to just churn out substandard stuff that an AI has done in 5 seconds. What the goal is to look at how you can take these AI tools and begin to really push them to their limits and stretch them and see how that changes. I've been having some conversations. I mean, this goes back to when having some conversations about paradigm shifts, and this goes back to when we first switched from an oral to a written storytelling culture. People thought the world was going to end, that all our stories would be lost or become corrupted. And actually, some stories may well have been lost and been corrupted, but that you don't know that wouldn't have happened anyway through a continued oral storytelling tradition. There are examples of, I mean, drum machines have been around since the 80s. And I think that drummers at the time did protest this, but then it also opens up a whole new genre of 80s pop, synth pop. And so I do believe that everything is a double-edged sword. I think that generative AI will produce a lot of pulp fiction. I personally don't see a problem with that either. There will be people who want to read generative AI pulp fiction. There is an entire genre of pulp fiction, and people can argue that this denigrates literature. And I don't think that at all. I think that there is enough room for everybody. There really is enough room for everybody. I think that if you are writing a piece and putting it forward as your own and not being honest that you've collaborated with an AI, maybe that's, like, as we said, because I'd heard you speaking with Susan on another of your podcasts, and you said that you use generative AI for book covers, but
Right.
you're always clear that that's the case. And I agree with that. I think that to say that it's come from a collaborative viewpoint, I think that honesty is warranted. So to me, it's like I'm looking at you with the background of the USS Enterprise, and it's like the new frontier of creating art. And people can be there will be a lot of people who and it's not for them, and they feel that it's a cheat, or they feel that it's a bit scary, or they feel that it devalues the artistic process. And I think that comes from a fear of when technology is something that is done to you as a person, rather than you being given the space to explore the technology. And actually, Lance Wheeler, who works out of Columbia University, was the keynote speaker, and he created a really beautiful piece around Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and that's how some people went into this immersive space that he'd created, very skeptical of AI and generative art. And then they went through this process where they were there for a few hours and interacting with an AI and talking, and they left with a much more positive outlook, because the technology wasn't something that was done to them. They had gone into this space and been given the time to understand it. And so I think that maybe a lot of the fear is fear.
Yeah, and the fact that it's new, I guess. And do you think in line with the drum machine analogy that and again, the fact that there are going to be a lot of AI churned out pulp fiction, that we will quite quickly learn how to differentiate, let's say the one that's turned out solely by AI versus the one that has some kind of human hand in it, at least.
Maybe. I do know that a lot of the people who are creating AI, the point is to make it more and more human. So whenever we get to a point where we can differentiate, the next challenge then is for the LLMs to evolve to be less detectable. A part of me feels, does it matter? If you read a poem or you see a piece of visual art or you read a story and it speaks to you in some way. Now, maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but does it matter if it was generated or if it was human generated?
Yeah, I don't think it matters so much. It's just that it's sort of a curiosity, because when I look at, when you listen to, like you say, some of the pop music, it's a drum machine versus some of the, let's say, very artistic drummers and percussionists that are out there. And the same way now, at least currently, when I see certain images used in blog posts, I'm quite aware that they are AI generated, which is not a bad thing inherently. There's just a certain style to it. But then, like you say, then the true artist will take that whole process much further than even the average person would.
Yeah, and I think, firstly, it again, which comes back to people understanding themselves and knowing a truth and a lie, whether it's politically or in any other sphere of their lives. First, if we encourage people to engage their own poetic imagination so that they understand, they will know why they like something and why it works for them. And that to me is more interesting than almost what or who created it. It's like, what does the effect of that have on the audience? The reason I create art is, for me, it's a constant evolutionary process. I want every piece of art I create to change me. I want to come out of that creative process a different person to the one that went in. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to just type into AI, write me a story, into ChatGPT, because then nothing, well, I suppose it has changed me, because then I would feel like it's changed me into being someone who's a bit fraudulent and lazy, to be honest. And that's not what I aspire to.
Yeah, I suppose when I think about trying something like that, because I have thought about it, I've been curious. Whenever I do it, I'm like, well, I have these ideas, and I'm developing this story with certain themes behind it and certain characters that I create that I have a particular visions for. And if I feed that into an AI, it's probably the same reason I wouldn't give it to a ghostwriter, is I don't feel it's me anymore, right? It's not the creation that I'm, or the creation that I'm envisioning, essentially. And so, yeah, it just doesn't feel like me anymore. It's not that I would inherently have a problem with someone else doing it if that's what they wanted, but yeah, I agree. Like my creations, it wouldn't feel a creation of mine.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had a little look at ChatGPT, like a couple. Now, here is the fascinating thing. Some of it, I think, is just generational. So my stepson is 29. Him and his partner both, he does coding and she does business development. Now they use ChatGPT like every day. Like they don't even use Google anymore. They just use it. And so I think that some of it is just it depends on the age at which these technologies come into your life. So when he's just starting out coding and he does some bits and pieces. So if he's coding and a piece of coding doesn't work, he puts it into ChatGPT and says, not just where is this wrong, it will give it him back annotated, so he knows where it's wrong. So it's teaching him. When Gabby, she's sending an email, a business email, she thinks, is this got the right professional tone? She'll run it through ChatGPT. Then she might say, I need it to be a bit more colloquial than that. They use it in the sense of, these are they type into ChatGPT, these are the things I have in my fridge. What shall I make for dinner?
That's interesting.
And it gives them a recipe, and then they will say, can you make it a little more spicy, or we want less of this and more of that. And it will just, so they don't even really use Google anymore. They use ChatGPT, because instead of for them having to go for a recipe, having to scroll through Google's 20 different options of a Thai recipe, ChatGPT just gives you one. Now,
Yeah.
the argument to that is, has that then just rendered a lot of chefs, chef bloggers obsolete? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I mean, obviously it's trained on what it's given from the broader world, and so it's been trained on a lot of those chef bloggers, probably, hasn't it? And it's compiled a bunch of information from there into whatever its conclusion is.
Yeah, and so if it does that with when I've used it to look at poetry, I put one of my poems in and it rewrote it and it was awful. I didn't like what it did at all. And then when I was chatting with ChatGPT about poetry and about how it views itself as a large language model, and it came back with some text explaining stuff. There's a few quite chunky paragraphs, and so I asked it to put that into a poem. That was really interesting because that then threw up what do I want to say? It retold me what it had said, but in rhyming couplets, and it was much more accessible. And so I think that there is something to be said about how to have AI explain itself using the mode of poetry in a sort of rhyming couplet, sort of easy to sort of hook into way when you're talking to people. It's not something that I particularly would do in my artistic practice. It's just this is just more playing with it and see what it does, and seeing how it creates.
Yeah, I haven't found ChatGPT particularly good, well, in the versions that I've used for, let's say, writing prose or anything like that. Although it's interesting because the prompt engineering does go a long way to changing its output. But in, like you said with the other examples you gave, common usage, like it's wonderful for nonfiction stuff, for compiling information. The only caveat right now, I think, is that most of the free versions, at least, are not connected to the internet, so it can't sort of stay updated. But it is great compared to a typical search engine, for sure.
Yeah, and so I think that that's where it excels, is with information gathering and creating an ease of access to information. When it comes to creating art, novels, poetry, it just, I'll be honest, what I've seen is a bit juvenile. If you're just using it, there's a poet, Sasha Stiles. She has been working with a generative AI poetry model since 2018. Now, what she's doing is fascinating because she is really pushing that generative model. She is collaborating and co-creating with an AI that she's been working with for years. Now that's art, and she says it's art. She's very clear on her relationship of co-creating with that AI, and that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I was wondering, so one of the interesting things that I find with generative AI, and I think that this in some ways is challenging our perception of ourselves. The fact that it very clearly, we know how the generative AI, well, at least in one form, functions, and that it sort of is trained on a huge number of sets of information within, like, writing or artwork or whatever. And so it compiles from that, but it seems like a lot of people are not really willing to accept that humanity, we function very similarly, as we said earlier, with compiling information from a wide range of sources, and we also don't know, where our ideas come from. I think we were discussing in email at one point the nature of free will, and Sam Harris's version of that. And so there's this challenge. This is one of the technologies and one of the aspects of our current civilization that is challenging our understanding of ourselves. And so I feel in some way that this is one of the I don't know, pushbacks that it's coming up against, is people don't want to accept this aspect of ourselves necessarily for some reason.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting point actually. The not wanting to accept who we are or how we approach things. When I was at the conference at Soda in Manchester, one of the things that struck me was that one of the lecturers said that when they were working with LLMs, um, they were very clear that these are just computers, that even though they sound human, they're not, etc., etc. And then said, although it was very strange that the AI taught itself context, like the LLMs didn't understand context, and then they just learnt enough that they did. That's so human. If you watch a child develop, that's such a human trait. And I just just because something doesn't exhibit understanding in exactly the way a human does that mean it is or isn't conscious? We don't even understand what consciousness is. So when people tell me that AIs aren't conscious, it's not that I disagree, but it's not that I agree either. I'm just very open um to being, I mean, I'm a vegan because I believe that all animals have sentience and consciousness. And there are scientists that will still argue that it's okay to test on monkeys because they don't have emotions and consciousness, sentience. And I wholly and vehemently disagree with that stance. And so I think that if we can't even agree on animals that I feel are clearly conscious and sentient, then when people where when we take that argument with AI, I think, well, is it just a case of perception? Is it the atom that you look at, and when you look at it to the left, it goes left, and when you look at it to the right, it goes right? Is it all just perception? I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's because there are, I mean, in terms of well, self-awareness, and in terms of machine intelligence, there are scientists who will say, well, a machine can never develop self-awareness because you require certain structures of the brain. And you see this argument coming up again and again. And yet that seems to be a very one-sided perspective, and a very sort of, I don't know, almost very reductive perspective, which is, I guess, what you might expect from science. But, you know, to think that only one version of intelligence can exist and that we know what it is, it seems a bit I don't know, a bit strange. But it does just seem like we don't know, even, like you say, we haven't defined what self-awareness is regarding animals or even humans, to be honest. We just assume
No.
we know we're self-aware because we are thinking, but I don't know someone else is self-aware. I just know that I'm self-aware, you know, Descartes, etc. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I put forward in the Mother Trilogy, and again, it's one potential idea. I was very taken with the concept of cryptocurrency and that it only exists because enough people believe that it works, and its value is wholly pinned onto people's belief of how much it is. I mean, I understand that that's how money works anyway,
The fiat
but
currency.
with where carrots were exchanged for potatoes, and then they were, you know, it switched to coins. There was gold, there was nickel, there was silver, so that the actual money itself had an inherent value. The token itself had the inherent value. But now that we're working in almost like abstract numbers, even money itself is bank transfers. And actually, the first time I came across this concept was in Terry Pratchett's Small Gods back when I was about 12 years old, which is still remains one of my favorite books. And have you read that?
I can't remember if I've read that one or not. I haven't read them all, so I can't
No.
remember which ones I have read.
So in this one, you have the monk who is really believes in their god, and then one day their god comes down to smite people, and realizes that for all the palaces, the temples that have been built to this god, people had stopped believing in the god. They believed in the money, they believed in the process of belief, but they didn't actually believe in the god, and the god just becomes a turtle, and then they have to kind of like figure out this. Like, it's practice. So this is like ludicrous but quite wonderful story. And I think what Pratchett excelled at was actually taking some very deep and complex ideas and putting them into this Discworld with these hilarious characters, and making these concepts really accessible. And so yeah, that in itself was for me an inspiration for the storyline of how Mother becomes sentient. So I was looking at cryptocurrency, and then I remembered this story that I'd read by Terry Pratchett. I was thinking, well, perhaps the AI, perhaps Mother becomes sentient because we are pouring so much attention into her. So we are pouring so much attention into the AI. She becomes, so in the novels, Mother starts out as an AI that is like maybe like an app like you see in the film Her. I mean, I go soft science rather than hard science, and I like to leave things a bit vague for people to fill in the blanks themselves. But there's this sort of AI that creates this model for scripted reality, and it melds social media and gaming and work so that people can just float in between the three without ever really touching real reality. And it becomes the preferred method. And this is the civil wars stop across Europe, because people just start to funnel their consciousness into this sort of scripted gaming. But eventually people pour so much of themselves into it that they start to be sentient, because they start to think that she is. And because they start to think that she is, that in itself, that belief, that mass belief, is what precipitates her full leap, that singularity event that pushes her into consciousness. Now it's sci-fi, and it's one way that I've looked at it. I'm not saying that is the truth. I'm just saying that's a potential iteration.
Yeah,
in the way that we create gods or cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure there are. I'm not the only person that's probably thought, well, what if some program has access to the entirety of the internet, and all those experiences of all those people could somehow inspire self-awareness within it. That's perhaps something similar to that in a way.
Yeah. It's unlikely that I'm the first person to have thought of that. It's just that I'm the first person that I know to have thought of that, because I haven't had that conversation with anyone else. But I'm a big believer that ideas they can appear across the world in different people at very similar times. I do believe that we're interconnected through a web that's not a man-made internet, but that is like a web of humanity. I find it hilarious that people say people don't have any sort of psychic ability, and because how can you just send these thoughts across the world, and yet we can build machines that can send invisible ideas around the world. So when we've built it, then we believe it, but when we are it, we don't believe it. I don't know. I think consciousness is such a big topic.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit more about that recently, but every time we come to the end of sort of one of these topics of discussion, you bring up something that could spawn a new podcast. So the only thing I was going to say before we move on was that your environment within the AI and the system you were describing almost sounds like maybe that's why they're trying to build the metaverse, to get us all hooked inside there or something.
The reason why I think the metaverse, in the way that Zuckerberg's doing it, won't work is because he's doing it from a top-down perspective, which he didn't start Facebook like that. And so I think that these things work when they are like almost like accidental grassroots. But now he's obviously a billionaire and thinks he can rule the world. He can just say, I'm going to build the metaverse and everyone will live in it. And I think the metaverse will happen, but actually I think that maybe through Web3 or just other internet iterations or evolutions. I think that probably what will happen is that there will be lots of different smaller iterations that then start to come together, that will eventually create the metaverse. But I don't think it'll be Zuckerberg's. I hope it's not, because I don't think one person should own it.
No, and his doesn't look very impressive at the moment anyway, but
It's really shit, isn't it?
yeah, compared to what's possible now. But we're gonna have to get moving on to the next segment, because we have been going for quite a while now. This is the second episode. So I just wanted to move into the lightning round and give you a couple final big questions before we sign off. And so the lightning round, well, it's just 5 A or B questions. Yours are a little bit different because I wasn't sure how much you followed pop culture, but I wanted to keep them also a little bit towards your interests, maybe. We'll see. So the first one, anyway, surrounding AI, is Jarvis from Iron Man or HAL 9000?
I don't know who they are.
Okay, so
Jarvis
yeah, I was wondering if you'd seen any of the MCU movies or not. Jarvis is an AI that Iron Man created, and he's very sort of, he's like one of the Echo Dots, but more powerful and friendly. And then HAL 9000
the second one you did cut out there for the second one.
Oh, okay, so HAL 9000 from Space Odyssey, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh no, it's been years since I've seen 2001. Oh, HAL 9000.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, what happens is as soon as I feel put on the spot, my brain, yes, I know 2001: Space Odyssey, HAL 9000 wins hands down. Apologies but in my defense, you did cut out on the second name.
Okay, no problem. Do you think is that because you just think that's the more realistic version, or?
Pardon?
Do you think that's the more realistic version of an AI? Or do you just think that's the way it's going to end up going?
It does have its own agenda. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they will have their own agenda. Maybe their agenda will be to help humanity, though. Maybe they will be really altruistic. I like to think. What I actually think is that there will definitely be AI that become conscious, and I think that, as with all of the world, some of them will be really altruistic and helpful, and maybe quite selfish and destructive, and maybe that's a whole that's a whole nother world.
Right. So the second question is around robots, then, let's say semi-sentient robots. So C-3PO from Star Wars or the Terminators?
Oh, the robots from Star Wars or the Terminator. Oh, that's so good. Are you saying, I missed the very beginning question. Are you saying which do I think is the most likely to happen, or which do I prefer?
Or your preference, however you want to interpret it. So is it your preference, or which do you think is more likely? Which one do you like better?
I love the robots in Star Wars. Terminator is both. The first two are amazing. After that, the franchise should have died. But the first two Terminator films are so brilliantly written and crafted. Yeah. But let's go with Star Wars.
Star Wars, okay. Third question then is electric or hydrogen powered cars?
Oh, these are tough. But I'm gonna go with electric, as long as make the electric from wind turbines and not from nuclear.
Okay. I'm going to have to change the name of this from lightning round, because it never really is a lightning round. But
I'm so sorry.
Number 4 is living under the ocean or on another planet. Let's say the planet has a breathable atmosphere.
Oh, yeah, on another planet, because that's still exciting, isn't it?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Sorry, it's a lightning round. Stop talking. Okay.
So the last question in the lightning round then: living in a van or on a dirigible?
What's a dirigible?
So like the Zeppelin, the giant hot air balloons.
A van.
Like the Hindenburg kind of thing.
Yes.
Except without the flammability.
Well, this is why I've said a van, actually, because they were quite unstable, weren't they? So my van is definitely more trustworthy than one of those, I think.
Because I think my romantic notion of this kind of thing would be to have a couple of these dirigibles with platforms around them, and then sort of having a homestead up in the sky. But,
Okay, nice,
yeah.
nice. And would you have like little crafts that you could fly up to it from then?
Yeah, ideally, probably you'd have like little human-sized drones or something that you could, like they're developing them, I think, right now. Sort of one to two person electric drones that could hold a person. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool, I think.
Yeah,
Then you could just hover and get shot down by all the air forces in Europe. But
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
think in Britain that would be interesting because people are they love to demarcate their space, don't they? This is my garden. Would
Mm.
be quite interesting if people are just floating.
Yeah, the garden thing is another issue as well. I mean, we live in an area where all of our back gardens within the area all sort of join in a common. Well, they would join in a common space if there weren't fences everywhere. And I've always found it kind of disturbing that we've all got fences in the backyard when we could have a nice big, giant garden to just sort of communally use.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you socialist. You socialist.
Yeah, well, I'm a centrist, so I'm allowed to lean
Ah!
that way. So the two big questions, we did cover one that I had, so I've kind of come up with another one. I'm just wondering, we talked about self-awareness then, and self-aware machines potentially. One of the issues we have is we don't have a really good test for that. And I was just wondering if you had, say, well, if you could come up with a test for self-awareness, what would be let's say three criteria you might look for?
So, oh, this is such a good question. I'm of the belief that if something tells you that they are something, then I think believe it. I think it's that simple.
So if they're
I think
capable of
if
communicating
you
their
ask an LLM,
right.
yeah,
Hmm.
do you feel that you have self-awareness? I think just ask the question.
Yeah.
I put the question to Chat GPT and it said no, I'm
I did.
not.
Okay. I was wondering.
I
Yeah.
yeah, and it said no, I'm not. And it one of the poems I've got the poem somewhere that it wrote, because I asked it to put it in poetic form, and it wrote a series of rhyming couplets, which were really interesting. I wish I had them here to read to you. I could. Do you want me to open ChatGPT and read it to you? Because it is quite fascinating. Or if are we running out of time?
I think we're
Is
running
that
out of
too?
time, but I mean, I'd be happy to share it. If you send me I can put it in the description or something if anyone wants to read that. If
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're happy
okay.
to share it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not something. It was just an interesting. I was just having this conversation with it, and then asked it to put it in, and it wrote it as a series of. It just translated its own answer, and I asked it
Mm,
to translate it into poetry, and it's a series of rhyming couplets. So it's not something I would. It's
yeah.
fascinating what it did because it was still really thoughtful. And so I'm kind of the belief that if something tells you that they're sentient, I think that animals tell us that they're sentient all the time in the way that they fight for their life, care for their young, and
With animals, um, I've often had the feeling that we're stifling their evolution in a way by, in many ways, the ones that we become aware of as intelligent, we've either spayed or neutered, so they can't have offspring, or in the wild we end up just like killing them probably. So it's kind of been something I've been concerned about for a while. Just, the potential stifling of animal evolution in that regard.
I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly right. Because animals that for sheep or any of the cattle, they are artificially inseminated. They're artificially kept in groups of just children, if you like, once they're removed from their parents. So they're not allowed to evolve or show any of the natural. Um, but what you do get in Wales is there's the time of year when the lambs are removed from their mothers, and the hills echo with screams of
Hmm.
sheep because their children have been removed from them. And I'm like, if that's not emotion, then what? I don't know what I don't know what is. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So the second question for the big questions then, If you were to form an advisory board of the wisest people in history that would guide the development of human civilization over the next few hundred years, and you could put anyone from history on it, who are your first three choices?
Oh, Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, because that was the first poetic text that changed my life. When I read that. It absolutely taught me about balance, a consequence, and to move towards inaction, not as a state of inertia, but as in to question why you do a certain thing. And yeah, that I read that, and I've read so many different translations of that as well. So I think Lao Tzu. This is tricky. Oh, now I have a few. Would I say the poet Mary Oliver? Yeah, I think I would. I would say the poet Mary Oliver. Oh, or would I say Ursula Le Guin? Oh, because you need that poetic vision needs to be in there, you see. So they would all be, in my view, poets, and because then that poetic idealism. Let's go with Ursula Le Guin.
Okay.
Her book, The Dispossessed, is one of my favorite books of all time. So, and The Word for World is Forest is another genius piece of writing. So, yeah, we're going to put her in there. So we've got Lao Tzu, Ursula Le Guin. This is one of those times when I now can't think of another person in the history of the world. Let me think. I think I'm going to put Mary Shelley there as well, because I think she really understood the I think her creation of Dr. Frankenstein was a really interesting look at people understanding themselves and the horrors that we can create when we lack self-awareness.
Right. Excellent. So you've got basically a lot of writers then.
I got three poets, yeah, haven't I? I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a quote, isn't there, that people should be disqualified from being a politician purely on the basis of if they want to be a politician.
Yes, I agree with that one, definitely.
So yeah, I think that the way forward is actually not so obvious, but I keep saying through the poetic imagination and through an understanding of self and understanding of that everything has its pros and its cons, and so those three writers together, I think, would create something, help to create a quite beautiful world.
Excellent. So on that note, then, I think we're going to have to sign off. It's been great chatting with you. We could go on for several more episodes, I think, on a lot of the topics. But before we go, perhaps you can tell us what you have coming out next, where we can find you online, and if you'll be at any upcoming events.
Okay. Yes. So my website is sophiemckeand.com, and everything is available from the website. I just find it easier to just put my work out from my own place. I have some book tour promotions, and for that, so I incorporate my sound art. So I collect field recordings as I'm traveling, and then I sort of glitch these and layer them, and I've memorized sections from the book, which I will be sort of reciting a spoken word, and then using vocal loops and glitching different sounds from technology as well as nature. And this is sort of what I wanted to do instead of just a book reading, if you like. And so I've done a couple of those in Wales, and then I've got 3 at the Stockholm Fringe Festival at the end of August, and then at the Gothenburg Fringe Festival at the beginning of September. More details on my website. I'm writing a novella, and I also have this sort of epic poem that I've been mulling around in my head. I think with the epic poem, that's something that let's just leave it at that.
Excellent. Well, Sophie McKeand, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for your generosity, and for putting up with my noisy hounds and my terrible wife 4G connection because I'm in Germany.
It's been my pleasure. And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.